Welcome to the Project Action Podcast. I'm Zach Klein.
And I'm Daniel Miller.
Our podcast is dedicated to covering news stories that we feel go unnoticed in the mainstream media. Our topic today is the Russian-Ukraine war.
Hey Zach, you know what's wild? It's been 1,000 days since Russia invaded Ukraine. 1,000 days.
That's just insane. I remember when it all started. It felt like the whole world was holding their breath. I mean, how do you see a full-scale invasion like that in modern times?
I mean, very rarely. This is the largest war in Europe since World War II. And it's changed so much. Politics, economies, and even the way countries think about security.
Totally agree. So where should we even start unpacking all this?
I say we begin at the start. February 24th, 2022. Russia launched the invasion, claiming it was to demilitarize Ukraine. But I think we really all know is about control. Ukraine had been leading towards NATO and the EU, and that didn't sit well with Putin.
Yeah, it wasn't like Ukraine was trying to attack Russia or anything. This was just a power grab, plain and simply. And I remember it wasn't out of nowhere. Russia had already annexed Crimea, sorry if I pronounced that wrong, in 2014, and backed the separatists in Donetsk and Luhansk.
Exactly. It was a build-up. And when the invasion started, Russia thought it would be over in days. They aimed for cities like Kiev, expecting Ukraine to fold. But man, did they underestimate Ukraine's spirit.
Oh, for sure. President Zelensky's line, "I need ammunition, not a ride," became legendary. That moment set the tone for Ukraine's resistance.
It really did. And while Ukraine was holding off Russian military, they were also rallying international support. Western countries started sending aid almost immediately. And sanctions hit Russia like a ton of bricks.
Right. Let's actually talk about those sanctions. The U.S. And the EU allies froze billions of dollars of Russian assets. They blocked exports and cut off Russian banks from SWIFT, the global banking system. That was just huge for the war.
Yeah, they really targeted everything from energy to luxurious goods. Still, Russia somehow managed to adapt. They started selling oil and gas to countries like China and India in order to create a revenue. So, in conclusion, I guess the sanctions did hurt, but they didn't entirely cripple Russia like we thought.
Meanwhile, the military aid to Ukraine has just been massive. The U.S. alone has provided over $100 billion in aid. We're talking everything from small arms to advanced systems like HIMARS. That is a highly mobility artillery rocket system. And tanks.
HIMARS was a game changer for sure. Those precision rocket systems helped Ukraine hit Russian supply lines, especially during the counter-offensives in Kherson.
Let's actually speak about those counter-offenses. Let's rewind to mid-2022. Russia had made some big gains early on, but Ukraine really started pushing back hard. Kherson was a huge victory for them, don't you think?
Huge. It was one of the first major cities Russia had captured, and getting it back showed that Ukraine could not only defend, but also reclaim its territory.
And then there was Kiev. The city became a symbol of just how brutal the war is. Russia eventually took it, but it cost them so much that it hardly felt like a win for them.
Yeah, Kiev is basically rubble now, and the human cost of this war is staggering. Estimates suggest hundreds of thousands of soldiers and civilians have been killed or injured. And even on top of that, millions of Ukrainians have been displaced. Roughly 5.7 million refugees abroad, among another 6 million internally.
Those numbers are really hard to process. And it's not just physical displacement. Imagine the emotional toll. Leaving your home, losing your family, living in constant uncertainty.
It's absolutely devastating. I say we now talk about the current state of the war. Right now, it's a stalemate. Russia controls about 19% of Ukraine, including cities as Crimea and Kherson.
And Ukraine's counter-offenses this year haven't made the kind of breakthroughs they were really hoping for. Russian defenses, trenches, minefield, and drones are making it incredibly hard for them to gain ground.
Still, Ukraine's resilience is remarkable. They've even taken the fight into Russia with cross-border raids. While those attacks are mostly symbolic, they show that Ukraine isn't just sitting back and they're willing to really attack.
True. And on the international stage, this war has reshaped alliances. NATO has grown stronger with Finland officially joining and Sweden on the way. Meanwhile, Russia is more isolated than ever.
Yeah, but not everyone is on the same page. Countries in the global south have been more neutral.
That's a good point. And let's not forget about Russia's internal challenges. The Wagner immunity in 2023 was a big movement. For a brief time, it looked like Putin's grip on power was really slipping.
Yeah, that was nuts. Even though the mutiny ended quickly, it exposed cracks in Russia's military and political structure. And even now, with winter settling in, both sides are preparing for another gruesome season.
Oh, winter warfare. Where do I begin? Everything slows down, the human suffering gets even worse. It's cold, everyone's hungry. It's just brutal.
Yeah, and looking ahead, so what's the end game here? I saw some experts think that the war could end in both sides collapsing, but others say it could drag on through the entire winter season.
Either way, the impact will last for decades, I think. Rebuilding Ukraine alone will cost hundreds of billions, and the geopolitical shifts, like a stronger NATO and a more isolated Russia, will shape the global politics for years.
Yeah, no doubt. And let's not forget the human stories that we've learned. For every political and military update, there are millions of lives to be affected every day.
That's where it really hits home for me. But hey, let's end on a hopeful note here. If there's one thing this war has shown, it's the power of resilience. Ukraine's spirit and the support from the Allies, and even the protests inside of Russia, gives me hope that Ukraine will survive.
Same here. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us today. Let's hope that when we talk again about this war, it's because peace has finally been achieved between both parties.
But until then, stay informed, stay hopeful, and we'll see you next time.